Welcome. Glad that you are here today. I'm going to take a few minutes and just share out of the book of Nehemiah, if I can, with you. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Nehemiah chapter 6. We'll be there for a little while in a series titled The Best of Intentions. And I share with this in the last few weeks that the subtitle for this series would be taking the best of intentions and turning them into focused actions, because many of us struggle with that. We have really great ideas and really great thoughts and what we'd like to do and what we'd like to accomplish, but the fact is, at the end of the day, whenever that is, maybe it's this year, maybe it's next month, maybe it's the end of the semester, at the end of the day, have you accomplished what you set out to do? And that's challenging for us, isn't it? Because many of us don't want a report card on the last 6 months, year, 2 years, 5 years of our life based on what we set out to do. So what we'd like to do is alter that along the way and just let that be the new target or new normal for our life. Instead of saying, God, what is it that you'll have me to do? Let me put that down on a card like I asked you to do, like I did, and say to God, this is what I've prayed about, this is what I've fasted about, this is what I believe that you're calling me to do, and this is what I'm going to do. With your strength and your power, this is what I'm going to do. We have a hard time with that because it feels like we're boxed in. Now it feels like we're held accountable in some ways. It feels like we're back in grade school getting a report card somehow. Instead of saying, I want to make my life count for something. I'm spending it one day at a time. I want to make it count. And God really wants your life to count for something. The discrepancy here is He wants your life to count for eternity. He wants your life to count for what He wants you to do because He created you to serve and to love Him and to share who He is with the people that are around you. So your best of intentions might be to do that, but do your actions demonstrate what your intentions are? So as we look in the book of Nehemiah, I want to share with you a specific thought in the book of Nehemiah today, because we come to a passage in chapter 6 in Nehemiah where an element of emotion comes in, and it's just screaming the whole chapter. This is an emotion that most of us deal with every day of our life in one aspect or another. It's an emotion that we like to play with, actually. It's fun when you play with this emotion in certain arenas. In fact, we do things that evoke it on purpose, and then we don't like that we like it. Isn't that weird? Isn't that really weird? The emotion is fear. The emotion that we experience is fear. And fear is one of those weird things because at least for a dude, for a guy, any guy that's sitting out here, for you to express fear actually feels like someone just pulled your man card. It does, doesn't it? If you express fear, especially when you're around females, and they don't express the same fear, you just feel like they're saying, give me the card. You don't get that anymore. And for some reason, we've made that a weird thing in our culture that guys are just supposed to be brave and supposed to be tenacious, and even women and moms and wives and women in the workplace. There's a part of you now in our culture, you don't express fear. You'll get fired for that. Ooh. If a project is daunting or if a boss is challenging or demeaning in some way, the expression is to respond to that. Because we have this narrow version of fear in our minds, that it's always in the negative context. But fear is actually a very positive emotion at times. Those without fear are very dangerous people. Think about that for a minute. Do you remember back in 9/11, 2000, right? Back when the planes were taken over by people that wanted to destroy our country? They created fear. If you do the math on it, they couldn't win. But because they created fear, they had that overwhelming impact on the people that they were on those aircrafts. We remember one name in specific, a man that overcame his fear, a guy named Todd Beamer, right? That name goes down in history. We all know Todd Beamer. But Todd said, you know what? I'm not scared. There's only 4 of you, and I'm a lot bigger. Todd was a football player from Indiana, Christian, very strong Christian man. And he was a big dude, and he was well-trained. And he thought, there's only 4 of you, and you only have a box cutter. What am I to be afraid of? If you're going to drive us into a building anyway, we're going to die on my terms, not yours. And he overcame fear, an improper fear that was placed on him to paralyze him. He was able to overcome that fear and do something that saved many, many lives. The lives on the plane were lost, but it wasn't. The plane was intended for a target to kill more and to create more fear. And he and some other people that were with him because of their ability to overcome fear, did something that no one else had done. Now, for you and I to sit down in the seat on the plane and shut up and sit down because 4 guys with box cutters got on the plane and are going to take it over, most of us would want to sit in that seat. And we want to submit to fear, improper fear. And many times in your life, actually probably never in your life, will you ever be on a plane where somebody takes it over. The chances are you'd be better trying to hit the lottery than trying to have that happen to you. Most likely it will never happen to any of us in this room. Have you ever been in a hostage situation? Most of us have never been in that kind of situation in our life where we had to deal with physical fear. But many of us deal with fear every day of our life that's debilitating in many ways. And it's our response to fear that we're responsible for. Nehemiah had a phenomenal reaction to fear-based intimidation in his life. But the reason that Nehemiah could respond so well to fear, and I want you to hear this, is because he had nothing to fear. Nehemiah didn't have any skeletons in his closet. Nothing that was going to be uncovered to make him uncomfortable or cower. Nothing that could be held against him and say, if you don't, then I'm going to play this card on you. He didn't have anything like that. Nehemiah was living a holy, set-apart life for God. That's what he was doing. So when it came time for someone to push back on him, Nehemiah was instructed by God. He was encouraged by God. He was given a task by God. And fear has no place in that at all. So before you separate Nehemiah from your life and your calling in your life, why is your life any different than the life of Nehemiah? Why should you give way to improper fear ever? Why should I? Why should I give a foothold to fear in my life ever? Now, there are certain things in our life that are a natural and normal fear. The fear of death is natural and normal. Without the intervention of Christ in your life and my life, death is something to be feared. It's a scary thing. There's fear of heights. Many people are afraid of heights. It's kind of a normal and natural thing to be afraid. It's an acquired fear, but it is a fear of heights. There's a fear of speed sometimes. You get going too fast, it scares you a little bit. Sometimes there's a fear of fire or water. Those are natural and normal fears in our lives. If a fire gets raging and too close to you, it creates a little bit of fear in you. If you ever have been around a torrent of water or a powerful waterfall, if you've ever been to a place where the waterfall is just, and you're right up near it, you really realize the power that's there, and it creates a natural fear of that. If you've ever been in a raging river or out on the open seas when they got the swells got a little higher than you wanted them to be and you lost sight of land, maybe you're on a fishing trip or a cruise somewhere and the seas got a little rougher than you want, there's a natural fear that occurs there in those type of elements. Some it's a fear of loud noises, or for some, this is scary, it's a fear of losing control of an area of your life, of losing control of your actions or your emotions. Those are fears. So why did God give humans the ability to feel fear in ways that nothing else can? Now, animals express fear at times. They do. They express proper fear. But we express fear in a whole lot of different ways than the animal kingdom does. Why is that? And how can we appropriate that fear? How can we know when the fear is our friend or fear is our enemy? Now, can you reckon with this just for a minute? Can we go along on this ride together? Can you agree that there are times when proper and natural fear is your friend? Yeah, it guides you and protects you, right? It keeps you from harm. And then there's times when fear is your enemy. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. The times when fear in your life is doing something in your life that it shouldn't be doing. It's either causing you to do something that you shouldn't and making you like quirky or weird and making you act in a way that you shouldn't act because you're fearful. Or fear is keeping you from doing what God designed you to do. That's the kind of fear that I want to talk about today. You're going to leave here, and if you were afraid of heights when you walked in, you're probably still going to be afraid of heights. If you're afraid of clowns, and I know that's a weird one, you're probably still going to be afraid of clowns when we leave. It's a little bit weird for me, but it is. Maybe some of you are afraid of snakes. You don't like the idea of something creepy crawly with no legs that's really silent and got a weird tongue on it. You know, I like that. You may still have those natural and normal fears today. God actually allowed that to happen because of sin. Did you know that before sin there was no fear? Eve and the serpent got along really well before sin occurred, and then there became a natural and normal distance of fear of man, of serpent. Yeah, it happened. Animals are afraid of us. We're afraid of some animals, and it's a good thing. I want to share with you today what Nehemiah did in the face of fear. And you may not even recognize that your behavior right now is fear-based in some ways. I hope today brings a little light to that why am I doing what I'm doing, or why am I not doing what I would really like to do? And is it fear-based? Is this happening in my life because I'm actually scared? Because again, if you're a guy, you feel like your man card gets pulled every time you say, you know what, I'd like to, but I'm a little nervous about this. I'm a little scared. I have some fear and apprehension about going this direction as a man. And in our culture, for some reason, that seems not manly. It almost feels, ladies, like you're not quite enough of a woman if you can't stand up and do what God has called you to do. You almost feel like you're cowering from that, when the truth is there's times when appropriate and proper God-given fear protects us, and it protects the people that we're around. Because without fear, we're dangerous. Without fear, we're a danger to other people. So there's a proper fear that God puts in our lives, a fear, and he uses the word the fear of God. It means reverence or respect. When it talks about God, we should have a reverence and a respect for God, always, always. But should we fear other things in our lives that God didn't design for us to fear and to stay away from or to have caution in? Are those the things in our life that has caused us to not accomplish what God has called us to accomplish? And that's what I want to address today. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1. I'm going to give you three guys' names that we don't really hear these names now, but they were names that Nehemiah had to deal with. It says, now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall. Now Nehemiah is halfway through the construction of the wall of the old city of Jerusalem. And there was not a breach left in it, although up to the time I had not set up the doors in the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, come, this is by courier, by the way, a written letter, a courier letter. Come, let's meet together in Hakkephirim on the plains of Ono. But they intended to do me harm. And I sent a message to them saying, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave and come down to you? So if you read on in the text, they sent this same message 4 times. They actually sent it 5 times, but the 5th time they sent this message, they accompanied it with an unsealed letter. Now, if you see that in Scripture right there, chapter 6, verse 5, if you see the word unsealed letter, there's a reason for that. And I want to tell you why the letter that was sent by them by courier for the 5th time was unsealed. If you were to send a letter to someone in that day, and it was an important letter, and it went with some authority, you would sign the letter, you would seal it, and then you would imprint it in a way that you would kind of seal the envelope. And if it was opened, it would be noticed that it was opened. So that's one thing, that the letter was private. It was just, I want to get it to you, I don't want anybody else reading it. So when you sent an unsealed letter, when a letter was unsealed, the assumption was that other people have read the letter. But when the person that sent the letter didn't seal it, they wanted other people to read the letter. Couriers were notorious for this in that day. If the letter wasn't sealed, they'd open it up and take a look real quick, and then they would share some of the information because they got the news before anybody else did. They were important because they got to share news that nobody else knew, and it was an important thing. So the letter was sent from Tobiah and Geshem to Nehemiah, but he didn't seal the letter. So what he wanted to have happen was the contents of the letter he wanted spread out everywhere. He wanted everybody to know a version of this letter. And you know how it happens when you tell a story about a story about a story about a story. The tale grows taller on down the line. So when Nehemiah received the letter, he was to understand that everybody already knew the contents of the letter. And the content of the letter was, they were accusing Nehemiah, the governor, by the way. That was his official position. He was a governor. They were accusing him of aspiring to be king and overthrow the king in Judah right then. That's what they were accusing him of doing. So they wanted that to spread. So when Nehemiah got this unsealed letter, after all the warnings he got and the invitations he got to meet these guys and talk about what's going on, even though he knew they were enemies, he was supposed to get this letter, realizing it was unsealed, and realize, wait a minute, everybody else got this too. Everybody knows about this. And the accusation is that Nehemiah is getting too big for his britches, that he's not happy with being a governor. He wants to be king, and he's building his own kingdom when he's rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Has anyone ever falsely accused you of something? You ever been there? Yeah, who hasn't, right? Something. You did that, you broke that, you said that, you didn't do this. Nuh-uh. Right? And you don't like that. You don't like the fact. So if they get, didn't he say that? Didn't she just say, did you hear her say that? Everybody knows you said that. Now we have a whole conspiracy against you. Now we have an unsealed letter, right, of something that you didn't do, but it's being accused of you. And it makes you defensive. It makes you quirky. You begin to experience fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of confrontation. The list goes on and on. Fear of accusations being waged against you. And you have a choice. When you experience fear in your life, most of us do two things. What are they? Flight or fight, right? Those are the normal and natural human responses to fear. We either get away from it and get as far away as we can. We walk away from the situation. It scared me. I don't want to be here. Something goes bump in the night. We run, right? We don't want anything to do with that. Or we get that mechanism that says, I'm scared. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna attack this thing. And everybody has a different response in situations when it comes to fear. Have you ever had the person that when you scare them, it's like super funny to scare them all the time? I love scaring certain people. I won't tell you who they are in this room, but there's a few people in this room that I love just giving the whole boo thing to, right? And then they freak out and like, stop that, don't do that to me. And then there's other people that if you scare them, you're probably going to get punched in the face because that's their normal reaction, right? They're going to react and swing at you. And elbows are flying everywhere. I see that. So you know who those people are, but those are normal, natural reactions to fear. So when someone comes to frighten you, they're looking for one of those two improper reactions. Know that. When someone intends to scare you, they either want you to run away or they want you to fight. They're antagonizing you, bringing you into a fight situation. That's what your enemy is trying to do every time an enemy of yours brings fear into your life. Now, when God allows a natural and normal fear of who he is, a reverence for God, to occur in your life, what God's trying to accomplish through this is he's trying to accomplish obedience. He's trying to accomplish obedience. Now, if you're a parent, let me give you two options here. Do you want your kids to love and obey you because they love you and they respect you? Or do you want your kids to obey you because they fear you? Now think about that for a minute. Think about it. Is it one or the other or both? Is it wrong for your kids to have a proper respect and proper fear of you? Is that wrong or sinful? Or is your only type of authority in your kids' lives and the implementation of your authority and their obedience, is it only love-based? I just want you to love me back, and that's how I want you to just obey me. And if you don't love me, then you're not going to obey me. See, it's a weird thing when it gets to parenting like this, isn't it? Some parents are just all fear-based. If you don't, I'm waiting. And the kids are always kind of doing this in their life, right? That's not proper parenting. That's not proper parenting. Some parents are like, oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do that again. Oh, please don't do that again. 57th time, I'm asking you not to do that. Right? Sometimes that kid just needs to be picked up and their hiney needs to get a little bit warmer than it is right now when they're little. Well, sometimes when they're big. See, God does a great job at balancing that with us. There's times when God says, I love you and I want you to love me back by responding to me in a way that demonstrates that. I want you to be obedient to me. Here's my commands, here's my rules, here's my laws in Scripture, here's how we can work together. And then there's times when God says, but if you don't, you can expect discipline because I love you. And every parent disciplines children that they love, right? If you love your child, will you or will you not discipline them? You will. And discipline creates a proper fear in a child. Not improper, proper fear. A reverence and a respect for a parent. So as a parent, if you've never disciplined your kids properly, you don't have their reverence and their respect. That's scary. That's scary because you're going to turn that kid out into the world. And the first time that kid responds to the law enforcement or their authority the way they responded to you and says, no, I don't have to. You can't make me. Guess what's going to happen? You've trained them. You've trained them to disobey authority. Now they're going to learn a whole new fear of authority. I love that God loves us and desires for us to love him back. And I also love that God says, you have a choice. I made heaven for those who love me and love my Son, and I gave my Son completely for you. All you have to do is respond to that. And we're good. That's what I created you for. I want to be in union with you. I want to have fellowship with you. I want you to be my children. But I love you enough to give you free will. I love you enough to give you a choice. And I'm going to tell you what the choice is way ahead of time. I'm going to educate before change. And God did that. Before he sent Christ, he brought the education. He gave all the Old Testament prophets. And Christ came and he said, I came, and you don't have to follow the law anymore. Just love God, love your neighbor. That's all you got to do. You're going to hang everything on those. See, law was fear-based. Grace is love-based. But the fear should still be there. That's a hard balance, isn't it? That's a hard balance. And you were brought up in a culture in your family that probably didn't balance that perfectly. And neither did mine, and neither do I. In my home, I don't balance, I love you, and you're going to have a respect for me. I don't balance that perfectly. There's times when I'm way too loving, and then there's times when I'm way too hard. Right? If we want to be honest as parents, there's times when we created fear when we should have tuned into that love aspect of our relationship with our kids. And there's times when we showed too much grace and mercy when they should have got law. And that's honest. That's just being honest as parents, because we're not perfect. God doesn't make mistakes. He's perfect in his balance. So Nehemiah is in this situation where these guys want to meet with him, and they send this unsealed letter to create fear. I want you to see Nehemiah's response, because Nehemiah lived a life that had nothing to fear. He walked closely with God. He had no skeletons in his closet. And I want you to see when someone walks that way, what your response can be when people come to cause fear or to intimidate you. Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 8 and 9. He said, Then I said to him, saying, No such things have you have said have been done. Remember, they said they were accusing him of wanting to become king, right? No such things have you said have been done, for you're inventing them out of your own mind. Wow, he just said it like it was. He just said, liar, liar, pants on fire, that's not happening, that's not true. Have you ever been able to say that one to someone that was leveling an accusation against you that wasn't true? Have you lived such a holy life and a clean life that when an accusation is brought against you, you neither picked a fight nor run away, you just stated the facts and you stayed the course? What if we could do that? What if when fear gripped us in some way, what if we could just stay the course? Just not move? What if it didn't cause us to be antagonistic and to lash out at the cause of the fear? What if we didn't do that? What if we didn't respond that way? What if we didn't run away from it as if it's chasing us down like a bear in the woods at night? What if we just stood right there and said, no, that's not true. I'm good. I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing right now. Wow, that's a force to be reckoned with, isn't it? Can you imagine if you and I could respond that way in the face of fear every single time? Even in our heart of hearts. We don't leverage, we don't get weird, we don't get all amped up, we don't start looking for something to fix the problem, we don't run away from it, we don't attack it in a way that it doesn't need to be attacked. We just say, you know what? Nah, not true. I'm going to go on my work. Because that's what Nehemiah did. It didn't faze him. He just moved along like he always did. He says, no, you're making it up out of your own mind. And then he shares with some of the people around him what was going on. Verse 9. He says, he's sharing this, for they all wanted to frighten us. They wanted to use fear. They wanted Nehemiah to do something quirky. Because when we get scared, we do something quirky. They said, their hands will drop from the work and it won't be done. And I love his response here. Nehemiah goes back to his knees and he prays. And he doesn't make a big deal out of this. He prays 7 words. 7 words, he says. Right in the middle of this situation where it could get really weird. He's got an unsealed letter. Everybody knows about this. The rumor's getting around already. He just stops right there and he says, but now, oh God, strengthen my hands. I love this prayer. He doesn't pray about them. He doesn't pray about the accusations. He doesn't pray about what's coming or they're going to fight him or try and kill him. He just says, God, strengthen my hands. To do what? To do the work you called me to do. He got refocused at this point. Before you got scared over whatever is causing fear in your life, and we cover it in a lot of different ways, but whatever you were doing before you got scared, can you get back to that? Or has fear caused you to go on this weird rabbit trail in life? And because you were scared to do the right thing, now you're doing alternate things, which is also causing fear and reactions to fear. What if you're like, wait a minute. What if I go back and do the right thing and don't give a foothold to fear? I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to fly from it. I'm just going to keep doing what I was called to do. Fear is just here to just annoy me. It's just to take me off my game. That's all. That's the only reason it's here. It has no other part in my life. What if you and I could actually live that way? Because, believe it or not, and I know this is a little cynical, but there are people that live to create fear in other people's lives. I know, weird, right? But there are people that live to do that. They're in business, and the way they do business is they create fear in other people's lives. I know I'm going to touch here, and I might get some repercussions, but I'm okay with it. There are people in government that live to create fear in people's lives, looking for a reaction. They either want fight or flight. What if we just said, Lord, tell me what you want me to do, and that's what I'll continue to do. I'll neither fight nor flight if those are not necessary. If those are not appropriate responses to what you brought my way, then I'll continue to do what I'm doing, because all this fear thing, this news, this information that I got, this situation that's coming my way, the only thing it was designed to do was to keep me from doing your will, and that's what I'm doing right now. So allow me to be steadfast in the middle of this. What would that look like in your life? How many situations can you filter through that right there, right now? And say, oh, okay, I get that. That makes sense. Now you have to go live it out, right? Because sometimes fear can cause us to do something. Sometimes fear is because we're not obeying God. And God's bringing some judgment in our life, some discipline, because God disciplines those he loves. And maybe that does need a correction or a move. But if you go back like Nehemiah did, and you say, but now, oh God, strengthen my hands. Nehemiah was called to do a good work. And everything in life right then was trying to take him away from that good work. The threatening of these officials, the threatening of his people, a surprise attack that we're going to kill his people and lessen his workforce. And now they're trying to get him to meet so they can take him out somewhere and kill him, or at least convince him not to do the work anymore, and he just won't buy it. So let me ask you this question. What has fear kept you from in your life so far, to date? What has fear kept you from doing right now? And for some, it's a laundry list, isn't it? This is what I wanted to do. And you can blame it on situations, circumstance, health issues, economy, COVID. You can blame it on anything you want. But the truth is, what has fear kept you from doing? I'm not proposing that we become reckless. Not at all. I'm proposing that we become obedient. And we put the blinders on and say, God, what do you want me to do? And that's what I'll do. Regardless of anything else that comes my way, that's what I will do. I will neither fight nor flight things that come my way. I will be obedient to you. Now, if you're on the path following God, that's the attitude. Maybe fear has come because you've walked off a little bit, and God's saying, hey, I'm chasing the ones that I love. Come on back. This is going to hurt a little bit. This is going to sting a little bit. This might be a little scary in your life, but this is a wake-up call to come on back track. I remember a bunch of years ago, there was a guy named Dave, and not in this area, none of you know him, and he was a tractor-trailer driver. And on a slippery road in East Chatham, New York, he hung a tractor-trailer over a bridge. It would have killed him if it let go. It was one of those things where the trailer was hanging, it was a feed truck, and the tractor was literally hanging over by the fifth wheel. You know, that's the pin that holds it together. And he was hanging there. He literally had to climb out of the cab, break the back window out, climb back up on the bridge, or if the truck detached, it would have fell and killed him. Dave hadn't been coming to church at all, just his wife and kids has, but Dave was too busy for church because he was working to support his family 6 days a week. And then on Sunday, he was getting stuff done around the house. That happened to Dave, made the news, helicopters, everything. He pulled the truck back up. He was saved. It was a miracle. He got an award. Guess where he was next Sunday? He was in church next to his wife. Guess how long that lasted? Yeah, less than a month. See, fear doesn't create a long-lasting obedience. It's short-term. So when God brings something in your life to get your attention like that, it may get your attention for a brief amount of time. But then when the crisis is over and the fear is gone, now what? Yeah. But God can use fear in our lives in a good and positive way. Some of us adapt that fear into our life and say, okay, I accept, that's what I needed, cool, I'm gonna make some changes. And others, as soon as the crisis is over or averted, we go right back to our similar behavior, expecting that God will allow that. I want you to see what happens next. Chapter 6, verse 10, it says, now, and these are hard names, now when I went to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the Mehtebel, who was confined to his home, he said, let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple. Now, if you don't know what this means, he's asking them to go to a place in the temple where only the priests were allowed to go. So the Aaron and his descendants were the priestly tribe. The Levites were called to tend the house of the priest. So Shemaiah is asking Nehemiah to go into the temple and close the doors into the holy place where no one would ever go, so that they can have a private conversation, because he's scared, and he's scared for Nehemiah's life. And I want you to hear what this looks like right here, how he goes on. He says, let's go in and close the doors to the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Has anyone ever told you that you were being hunted? Probably hasn't happened to many of us. Maybe some of you are in the military and you were on a deployment somewhere and you realized that you had people that were trying to kill you. But for most of the rest of us, we've never heard that before. We've never been hunted before. So I want to give Nehemiah a little bit of credit here, just for the fact that this guy gave him the heads up and said, hey, you're being hunted. They're going to kill you. And Nehemiah's response, and he goes on, he says, and they're coming to kill you by night. Isn't everything scarier at night? Isn't it crazy? You could take a beautiful walk in the woods during the day, and it's phenomenal, right? You can go walking, and it's beautiful, and if you're in the fall, you're crunching leaves, and it's wonderful, and you're seeing birds. You go back to those same woods at night, and you think that you are being chased by every scary thing known to man. For some of you, right? The woods is the worst place in the world at night, like way deep in the woods. You don't know where you're going. You're scared. Every noise is scary. So here it is. They're going to come and kill you at night. Oh, no. It's that thing again, the night killings. They're worse than the day killings. Isn't it crazy how really Satan will allow fear to grip you where you're most sensitive in your life? Where you have a natural propensity to be scared more than someone else would, and that's where fear attacks you most. That's where it makes you do something quirky, to run outside of the will of God. Nehemiah, I love his response. He says, but I said, should such a man as I run away? He's a governor. People look to him. He's an example. Should I run away? Really? Should I do this? That's an amazing response. I could see him looking this guy in the face and say, should such a man as I run away? It wasn't that he was thinking too much of himself, but he was saying, God has called me to do a good work. Should I turn my back on the good work that God has called me to do to give in to fear? And not to minimize any of us. I mean, Nehemiah was doing a great work. It lasted a couple of months. This particular work lasted a couple of months. He did much more than that. But how about the great work that God's doing in your life right now? How about the people that you are supporting? The people that you're influencing, the people that you're encouraging regularly, the people that you're directing, the people that you're being an example to that look to you. Should such a man as you or such a woman as you do such a thing? Should you give way to fear? This was the flight mechanism right here. Let's go hide in the temple. They'll never find us there. They'll never go look in the temple. And that's this guy was appealing because he was friends with Tobiah, come to find out. He was appealing to a mechanism within Nehemiah that could have worked to provoke him to sin. And I really think a lot of us live there from time to time because of fear. We actually live in sin. But it's really hard to tell someone that's scared in a situation, you're actually in sin right now. That's kind of a hard thing. It's like throwing salt on a wound, it feels like, right? Like if somebody's down, don't kick them when they're down. If somebody's living in fear, you don't really want to say, hey, I know that you're scared right now, but that fear is a result of sin. You have a lack of faith in your life right now. Can I come alongside and help you? But what you're doing right now is real quirky, and it's not obedient to God. It's not. Do we love each other enough to tell each other that? I mean, honestly, do we? Can you see someone giving into fear in their life in a way that they're not doing what they were designed to do by God? Maybe they're not living up to the potential that God gave them. They're cowering from that. They're not investing in God's kingdom the way that they ought to invest. And you can see it's a result of fear. Do you love that person enough to say, hey, I love you? It looks like you're living in fear right now. That's a hard thing to say to someone, isn't it? Because the relationship has to be pretty solid in order to be able to send that. Otherwise, it gets really thin in a hurry. But if you know someone well, and you love them deeply, and you've built that relationship with someone, why couldn't you go to somebody and say, listen, I think what you're doing is acting out of fear. You're built for more than this. God has greater plans for you in his kingdom than what you're doing right now. I think this is fear-based. I do. Now, that might sound judgmental, but so it has to be put in the context of a really loving and caring relationship in order to do those things. But isn't it great when you ask someone to step up to the potential that God has given them? Isn't that a great thing? Isn't that an awesome thing to do for a friend or a family member or a loved one or your husband or your wife or your kids? Sometimes your parents. I think you're living in fear right now. I think you're cut out for more than this. I'm not being judgmental. I just see what it is. I think you've given way to fear in your life. You're running right now. You're running from what you were called to do. And sometimes you're fighting something that you shouldn't be a fight. Just dismiss it and move on. It's not worth the fight. Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 12, Nehemiah reckons and kind of squares with us about what God's doing in his heart. And he says, now, and I understand and saw that God had not sent him. This guy that prophesied against Nehemiah tried to pull him into the temple to do something off balance. He said, I know that God had not sent him, but he had pronounced and prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Oh, the shut-in, the guy in his house that didn't want to come out. We don't know why he was shut in. Maybe he had some disabilities where he was in his house, this guy that prophesied right now, and said, hey, let's go to the temple in the inner court. Maybe he was just scared to come out of his own house. We don't know. But we know that he was in relationship with Tobiah and Sanballat, and they had hired this guy to get Nehemiah to do something off balance because of fear. It says, for this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way in sin. I highlighted those two words, afraid and act. I want you to see this. I want you to see it bright and clear so you can remember this. And I'm going to close here in just a moment with one more verse. But usually when we act, there's an emotion that drives the action. Can we agree on that? There's an emotion that drives our action. Love, commitment, hate, fear, whatever. Commitment, love, you name the emotion, and they all go around in a circle. But he was saying he wanted me to become afraid, and then out of fear, they were looking for me to act, and they gave me opportunity to. Now, you can blame this on Satan if you'd like to. You can blame it on other people. But within your own nature, there's faith or there's fear. And they can't coexist, although we do get a mixture sometimes. We do get a mixture. It's like that half and half, lemonade iced tea thing. Some people love half and half. You like the mixture. And in our lives, there's a part of us that can have fear, and then there's part of us that can have faith. And I think most of our life, to be honest with you, most of our life is a battle in our hearts between those two. It's a battle between, I have enough faith to do this, and I'm scared to do that. I have enough faith to stop this, but I don't have enough faith to even try to stop that. This guy was hired to cause fear so that action would come out of that fear. So before we go on and finish this, I want to ask you, what action are you displaying right now? The way you're acting right now in life, all different ways. Your spending, your eating, your conversations, your employment, on and on and on and on. Is it faith-based or fear-based? It's one or the other. He said he wanted me to be afraid and act in a way and sin so that they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. They were trying to get him off balance so that they could have a chink in his armor, so they wouldn't be such a focused guy on what God had called him to do. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 14. He goes back and he prays. I want to end with this prayer today that Nehemiah gives to God. And I want you to read this. It's actually a pretty amazing thing that in the middle of all this, while this is all going down, he has such a clarity of thought to pray this way. He says, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God. Now, is it wrong to pray for your enemies? No. Is it wrong to pray that your enemies leave you alone? No. Is it wrong that your enemies get the justice they deserve from God? No, not at all. What was this based out of the heart of? Why did Nehemiah want God to remember Tobiah and Sanballat? Why did he want him to remember them? Here's a weird thing. Did God allow these men to taunt and to bring this against Nehemiah so far? Did God allow it? Yeah, he did. The 4 times they sent him a message, the 5th time they sent him the same message, and they tried to meet him on the plains, and they tried to accuse him of trying to overthrow the king, and he was going to go from governor to king. God allowed all of that. And he says, remember, Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God, according to these things that they did. Ooh. So our actions, what we do, will be governed by God's judgment. And this is also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. So let me ask you, is there anybody in your life right now, think about this honestly, fresh, clean slate. Is there anybody in your life right now that wants to make you afraid? Now, some of you, that just drew a chord, right? Because you're thinking of childhood and the way that your parents parented. Yeah. Not good, right? Not good. It's fear-based. All fear-based. For some of you, you're in a work situation and you're scared to death to get out of line or to make a mistake at work. You have a boss that's just like intolerant. And it could go on and on. Maybe some of you ladies are in a marriage relationship that you say the wrong thing, or husbands too. You could say the wrong thing and boom, like a bomb went off. Verbal, physical, throwing things, abuse. Yeah. And it's fear-based. It's not wrong to pray and say, God, the people that are causing an unnecessary and ungodly fear in my life. Now make sure that it is that way, because sometimes God uses people to correct our sinful actions, and that can cause fear. God instituted all authority among man, and when you're breaking the law, you ought to be afraid of the law. You ought to be. That's proper. Because law enforcement is there to uphold the law. Judges are there to uphold the law. So if you have a fear of the law right now because of your actions, maybe you should change your actions. It says, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God, according to the things that they did, and the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. Are you aware of the fact that some people want to make you afraid because they want to modify your behavior? They want to control you. Are you aware of that? You should be. You should be. Fear-based control is a dangerous thing. Now, should we fear God in the form of reverence and respect? Always. And God gives us free will. But He is a just God. He is a righteous God, and He's an all-powerful God. You should know that. I should know that. For some of you, this may modify some of the relationships that you're in right now. For some of the people that are oppressing others, you did not want people to hear this today. So I can balance this because this is one piece of this whole series. I do believe in proper authority. And I do believe that proper authority should be able to execute the judgment of authority when necessary. I do believe in that. I do, strongly. Scripture believes in that. Scripture says God has instituted all authority among man. There is no authority that God has not instituted. There's a proper fear and respect for authority in your lives. Whether you like it or not, it should be there. But when fear becomes the only tool that an authority or a person has in your life, or a government has in your life, something has gone really wrong. And when that happens to you, I want you to be able to act properly. That's what Nehemiah did. Authority kept bringing it against him in different ways, trying to create fear, trying to distract him from the task at hand. And he didn't fly away from it and run. He didn't even fight against it. He just continued to do what God had called him to do in spite of it. That might be your calling today. Get your head back in the game. Get back on the goal at hand. What were you called to do by God? What is that? And are you doing that? Or has fear distracted you and caused you to do some other things? Are you spending so much time playing defense that you're not playing offense? You're not winning the game. You're not putting any points on the board because you're just scared to death. You might be in a lifeless marriage right now that's just fear-based. Maybe it's a job thing for you. Maybe it's health. You're just scared to death of going to the doctor again. And that's caused you to just cower up inside of yourself and not do what God has called you to do because of what you're going through right now. It's a number of things, right? It could be the loss of a loved one that you're experiencing fear, and you just can't focus anywhere else right now. We love the idea of being fearless, don't we? The idea of it is really cool. We love watching movies where the hero or the heroine is just a fearless individual or a fearless group of people. We love seeing that. We love seeing it in real world events when people are fearless. Why aren't you? Why don't I live a fearless life? Why do I succumb to fear? Why do I give it any credibility or foothold in my life at all? Well, the truth is, when I live a life that reacts to fear and it takes me off the goal that God has given to me, it's sinful. But it's really hard to look at a person that's scared and say, stop living in sin. That's hard to do. It almost feels like you're throwing salt on a wound. I want to close today and just share with you, I don't want you to live in fear. Not a man. If you have a fear, a reverence, a respect for God, good. Hope that increases a lot. I don't think we fear God like we should. I think we're a little cavalier with our relationship with God sometimes. But the fear of man is so big in our lives sometimes that it keeps us from doing what God has called us to do. And I would love to see what your life and what my life looks like when we don't live with any fear in our life anymore of anybody. We only respect and fear God and Him alone. We obey authority, absolutely. We obey the authority that God has established, whether we like it or not. We still do that. In our home, in our school, at our job, on the streets. Yeah, we obey that authority with fear, proper fear and respect. But it doesn't make us do weird things like flight or fight. All that sideways energy in life when we really should just be focused on the task that God has given to us. Lord, thank you for the day that you have given us. Thank you for this passage in Nehemiah where he was just torn, Lord. It just wouldn't end. The work was heavy. The rubble was deep. The workforce was giving out. And then the threats began to come. Physical, governmental threats. Boy, I don't know what that feels like to be in his shoes, but thank you for the example that he set for us, that he dismissed them. He literally just dismissed them. You're making this up out of your head. Crazy great response. And he went back to do exactly what you called him to do. Lord, thank you for that example. I pray that we would live that out this week. If there's something that we've gone off on a tangent about and we're playing defense somewhere because of an irrational fear, I pray that we'd stop. If we're trying to hang on to a relationship that you've already got it and we're spending a boatload of emotional energy on it, I pray that we would stop, that we just leave that in your hands. Or there's so many things that can cause us to be afraid, whether it's physical fear or fear of situations, loneliness, finances, health, a lot of things that could cause us to be afraid and act in a really quirky way. But I pray that we wouldn't be. I pray that we would be a fearless people because we trust in you. Some haven't had a great dad figure that always had their back. Some had to fend for themselves here, so it lends itself to being fearful. Lord, I pray that as we grow in our relationship with you, our daddy, that we understand that you do have our back all the time. You're all loving, all powerful, and everywhere. What more could we ask for? I pray that you'd give us a great rest of the day knowing that we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to fear man ever, anytime. I pray that our love and our respect and our reverence for you would grow deeper as we place more of our trust in you for our daily needs, our daily bread. Watch over us today as we go about your business. It's a little chilly out there, so pray that we would bundle up, stay warm, have a great afternoon. Be with those right now that came to this service that intend to serve in the second service. Thank you for that, Lord. Pray that you'd watch over us. Give us a great week. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. God bless. Have a great and warm Sunday afternoon.